Hello, my name's Anne Currie. Welcome to the Building Green Software from O'Reilly Book Club. Each month we discuss one chapter of the book with the authors and guests. The book club is open and all are welcome. Just follow Anne Currie on LinkedIn for the links and the timings of the next recording. Enjoy it. So I'm Anne Currie, and Sara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Sara Bergman, one of the authors of Building Green Software.
And you work these days for Microsoft.
Oh, yes, I do. I do work for, I am a senior software engineer at Microsoft. I write code for a living. I really enjoy it. Been working a lot with a few different things there. Just changed teams, so I'm still struggling to find a good way to describe my new work. But it has to do with efficiency utilization of services in the cloud.
Excellent. That is very good stuff to be doing. And I'm Anne Currie from the one of the other book authors, and I work for it. I've got a small learning and development company called Strategically Green, and we do training. So if you like this kind of thing and you want more of it, then please do come along. And our final co-author, Sarah, is not here today because she has to get a lot of permissions before she does anything from who she works for. So sometimes she will be here and sometimes she won't be here. So the structure of the call is going to be that what we were intending is that Sara and I would answer a couple of questions. Just unmute yourselves and say what the question is. But don't worry if you don't have any, because we have plenty to get started with. If you have any things you want to say, do say it. This is not a presentation. This is a group chat. So yeah. So my first question that I was going to pretend that somebody had asked us, Sara, was what did we want to achieve from building green software when we wrote it? Because that is pretty key to writing a book. Is a really difficult thing to do. It takes a whole load of time. It's particularly difficult if you are also having a baby at the same time, like Sara was. You have to be motivated. So what was your motivation, Sara? What was my motivation?
Yeah. Pro tip: don't do that. Don't have a baby and a kid at the same time. There are easier ways to live life. No, but I think so. So here's the thing: for personal motivations, for me, there were so many things. Like I get to write something with you and Sarah. Big win. We had worked a bit together in the Green Software Foundation, and I think the three of us had great chemistry, and we wanted the same thing and the same message to kind of reach out, at least from my perspective. Like we don't maybe 100% agree on 100% of the things, but like all of the big things we agreed on, and it was every conversation that we had was so energizing, which I'm sure people will notice here. We're like, always, anyone who's listened to a podcast with, or poor people ever try to edit a podcast with the three of us, we enjoy ourselves a lot. So that was a big thing. And secondly, maybe bigger from like a technical point of view, was that the time felt ripe. This kind of book didn't exist. Really, there wasn't, like, if you wanted to know what is sustainability in IT, what is green software, there was no like written artifact you could go to. There were things popping up, so we felt the time was ripe. That's also why we went very fast. And also thirdly, like I'm not you, Anne, so I don't already have a bunch of books on my resume. This is like I get to write a book. You can't see because I've blurred my background, but there's a huge. I love books. Books are amazing. So the fact to get to write one, it's just a dream come true. So yeah, the timing was terrible, but there was no doubt in my mind that I should not do this. What about you, Anne? Why did you write a book with two Sarahs?
Well, yeah, I had no doubt that we would finish the book because we are as a team. It was there was no doubt. There was no doubt. We are to reclaim the title, Girly Swats. So it was quite
Lady
clear.
Gang.
Started, we were going to finish the book. There was no doubt in my mind whatsoever, and we were going to move ahead and deliver early, as we did. But I think for me. Particularly because I've been around in this area for a long time. The Green Software Foundation was part of it, but that wasn't my first rodeo when it comes to this stuff. I've been around for a long time. One thing that I was realizing is that there was no consistency on the message. You know, lots of people were saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to rewrite our systems in Rust, we need to do, you know, and we need to do nothing at all, we need to never go to any conferences again, we need to, you know, it was like
Yeah.
all of these mixed messages all the time. And a lot of them were conflicting, a lot of them were clearly almost messages that were doomed to failure. It's as if people were saying, I'm going to say something which I know people aren't going to do, and then I can say, oh, well, I said we should do something and nobody did it, so I cannot be held responsible for that. We actually needed stuff to happen. So it felt like we needed to pull together all the sensible things that people were doing that actually businesses would do and were plausible for businesses to do, and write them down. So that, and in that sense, you and I and Sarah were very aligned. It was like, no,
Yeah.
look, you know, don't do nothing, don't close your business down, don't, you know,
Yeah.
don't say, well, I can't rewrite my systems in Rust, so I won't do anything at all. You know, yeah, it
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah, and I remember so how it works is that you draft like a proposal for a book and then you get feedback on it. And then yeah. So we got feedback from our proposal and we had, I think, like an hour meeting schedule or something to go through this. And we were done in like 5 or 10 minutes because we're like, yep, no, agree with this. Nope, nope, this doesn't make sense. Thank you for the comment. We don't agree. It was just like we had such a clear vision, which made everything so much easier because people at least told me like, oh, I'm writing a book. They're like, don't get co-authors. And I'm like, I have two. But I think it worked because we were so clear on what the message was that we wanted to get out and how we wanted it to get out as well. Because our book is, if I may say so myself, quite funny. Like we tried to be funny at least. And I think it was very intentional. Or what do you agree on?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it was, in some ways, it was a crazy scheme because you started writing a book and you'd never met. You agreed to sign up and you'd never met Sarah in
Yeah.
person. And it's an interesting example of hybrid work in that we were all remote, but we did at QCon, 2 QCons, manage to meet in person. And it is interesting how much you do actually need to meet in person for at least an hour. It really kind of helps align things very quickly. So
Yeah.
I think it would have been more difficult to do this if we'd never met in person.
I agree.
Yeah, but yes. So that was our motivation, and it's interesting how close our motivation was. We all wanted it to happen. Um, so the idea of the book club is that every week we'll discuss one chapter. So every month we're probably going to do this every week. That's a bit much, but every month we'll discuss one chapter. And the chapter that is available under Creative Commons that I've circulated this, if people haven't got the physical book or the Kindle version, is the introduction. And the introduction was a controversial thing to do. We got some "Are you crazy?" feedback on the introduction because we decided to do the introduction as a summary of the entire book, so that if people got no further than the introduction, then they would still have taken away all the key messages from the book. And I think our reasoning for doing that was that it's half an educational book, but it's half a kind of campaign that, you know, it felt a bit like, I know this isn't what you normally do at O'Reilly, but we want something slightly different, which is that we want to actually make things happen. And we know that people aren't always going to read to the end of the book, so we can't have all the stuff that we want people to do happen at the end of the book. We need it to happen at the start of the book and the end of the book with a bit of more detail in the middle. But that was how do you feel? Do you think that in the end that was the right thing to do?
I do. I am very happy with it because I think it, like you said, if you can just read the first chapter and still get something tangible out of it. And it's also, you can also use it as a guidance to see which chapter should I begin with. Maybe you pick and choose. You don't have to read the cover to cover. You can like select some, you can jump back and forth, and that can be a more in-depth guide to where you should start than just index is it called index? Chapter
Yeah.
order
The
list thingy in the beginning. Yeah. Um,
contents.
so I think that's good, and it gives maybe a bit, yeah, more about each chapter. So I do really like it. It's also funny when people read it and they're like, the first chapter is kind of like the mini book. I'm like, yes. And they're like, okay, you know about this. And I do. It was a choice. So that's always a bit funny when people do read it cover to cover, because then they're like, yeah. But I think it's a pattern that makes sense also outside the book. Same if you have like a newsletter. Think about, what if people have 30 seconds, 5 minutes, an hour? Like, how can you take things away? Same if you have a conference talk. You want to, like, don't bury the lead. Just there's no secrets in this book. We want you to use what we have in it, so we want to make it as like available to you as humanly possible. So I'm still happy. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's interesting because my 8 of my other books that I've written are thrillers, like sci-fi thrillers. In a sci-fi thriller, you can't reveal the twist at the end in the first chapter. That is sci-fi thrillers 101. Don't reveal the twist in the first chapter. But it felt like, and in some way, I mean, the whole point of not revealing the twist till the end and keeping things back is to keep people reading through the book so they finish it. But with an O'Reilly book, I thought that was a bit of a risk.
Yeah, we're funny, but we're not sci-fi thriller funny.
So I realized that although I've said everybody can jump in at any time, we chat so much that in fact there are no breaks in our conversation for people to jump in. So we'll leave a little break now for if anybody has anything they want to interject.
Well, I want to ask about that because obviously it is an O'Reilly book. You're going to write it as that. Here's a chapter. Somebody can read one chapter at a time, and it stands on its own. Had you considered doing something like, say, the Phoenix Project, where it is a story and here's how we implement the things?
Well, yes, I did think about that because in some ways my thrillers are are a version of that. In that I did so I'm not unaware of that, and I really like the Phoenix Project. Although the Phoenix Project wasn't, of course, the first version of doing that. There was another book called The Gift. I think it's called The Gift. No, The Goal. The Goal that was written sometime before that. Apparently, is really good. It's about running factories better. And I'm told that that's amazing, and that's on my reading list to read. And the Phoenix Project was using the same idea as The Goal. But I thought, oddly enough, I was talking about this quite recently because I just reread the Phoenix Project, and I was talking to my husband who just read The Goal, and we were talking about at what point do you start a book version of your concept? And we thought it was too soon for Building Green Software to do that, because The Goal and the Phoenix Project were basically descriptions of things that were quite embedded in a couple of organizations. So they could kind of go, right, okay, what we need to do, this is really well known. Whereas Building Green Software felt a bit too early for a Phoenix Project. I think maybe a Phoenix Project version of Building Green Software, where everybody has to build in fact, could be done by my characters in my science fiction novel. But I think we need to get it bedded in a little bit further first.
Yeah, I agree. Oh,
sorry, go for it.
no, I agree, because I feel if you go to a conference or a meetup or some kind of public speaking engagement, and if you talk about DevOps, there are these kind of joint truths or joking points or things where you connect with the audience because you've had the same lived experience. But very much with green software, when you go out and talk about it, things that, so what I've started recently is that I have a slide in one of my talks about energy proportionality. For me, I've known about this for so long. It feels like old news to me. And then I asked the audience, who knows about energy proportionality? And like no one, or like some maybe. So there are no shared truths and there are no shared jokes that we can make yet. I mean, hopefully it will come and we're gaining traction, but still the kind of education level is, as Anne says, fairly low. So we want to get the right stuff out first, and then we can jest about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mention that, because I'm not from a super technical background, but I've been involved in research interviews with product people, and we asked them about their perception of sustainability in digital. So for physical products, it's always quite easy because you can literally see the physical waste piling up, right? But with digital, well, we asked them, what does sustainability mean for you? And they were like, I don't know, going paperless. I think that was the best, most tangible answer we got. And I don't judge that. I mean, at least you're going paperless, you know, in 2024, maybe a little bit late, but at least you're still doing it, right? You're committing to that. But there was literally no understanding of it, meaning no, like you had a really hard entry point, even running a discovery interview, because the people you tried to discover it with didn't know that the thing existed. So I can totally see how you guys just wanted to get the basic message out first before you go on a whole story, right? And Phoenix Project style.
Inevitably, we will eventually go Phoenix Project style, because I love a thriller, but yeah, not quite yet. It's interesting. It's really it's hard to get. It's hard to get people to tell real life stories at conferences and things. Although there's starting to be some examples of people who are doing it for real. But the irony is that a lot of people who are really making good progress on producing more efficient systems are not doing it to be green. They're doing it to be more resilient, or to save money, or usually to be more resilient, to save money. And they're terrified about rebranding that or branding that as being. They're often terrified of branding that as being green, because they say, "Oh, people will say we're greenwashing. That wasn't our original intention." And I would say, well, it doesn't matter what your original intention was. If the effect is green, it's green. It's not greenwashing.
Yeah, I completely agree.
One question. Have you ever discussed during your meetings for the book to put it in a format which resembles, rich content? I'm thinking of, Sara, for you, SharePoint, a mini website, or Confluence, where you can, splash your book and put graphics here and there, and people can navigate. Have you ever discussed or thought of that?
No, we haven't. I mean, we are completely. Well, it's interesting. To a certain extent, we're completely at the mercy of O'Reilly, because they do all the formatting stuff. But also we're not, because we negotiated on the book that there would be a Creative Commons version. So actually people can do anything they like with it, with the text, as long as. So if you wanted to do such a thing, I'd be quite happy to give you all the text. And as long as you referred back to the book and said it was the O'Reilly book, and you didn't sell it, and it was, then yeah.
Well, I can tell you, this was a lifesaver to me, not because I write books. I work for a UN agency that specializes in public procurement of goods and services. So anything from Band-Aids to nuclear plants, everything. Total, let's say, purchasing per annum is $3-4 billion, of which 300 million is ICT, products and services. So I was, elected to create the policy and good practice for carbon action ICT procurement. I'm not a procurement guy. I'm a veteran of an ex-assembler programmer in the 1970 something. So I wrote this policy, which was like 30 pages or something, and I went to the round of reviewers, and everybody was asking a different thing. So I thought, how can I get over this? Because it was so difficult, to please everybody. And all of a sudden I said, hey, we don't use Office 365, we use JCP, and we have Confluence. So I started, to disaggregate the bits and pieces, and everybody was happy. So I'd be pleased to repeating the experience with with the book. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting you say that. We went for the most basic sharing, the cheapest and most. People are always a bit disappointed with what we did. We just put the whole thing in a Google Doc, and then all had shared access to the Google Doc.
Well, I was doing the same. I mean, it was there were no videos, no nothing. I mean, plenty of references to white papers, to this and that and that, a couple of images and things like that. So it was 70% or 80% text and some good graphics, charts. But anyways, I changed the format and everybody was happy. So
I love it. I love that
consider
story.
myself a book designer.
Well, it's actually it's interesting. This is a bit off topic for the book, but it's kind of related to your question, which is how do you get people to collaborate on things? That with the maturity matrix, so that's chapter 12, I think. The maturity matrix, we donated that to the Green Software Foundation, and we wanted to make sure. Actually, before we did that, before it even went into the book, I put it in a Google Doc and I put it out in the public, and got loads of people interacting with it, suggesting things. Did it all through Twitter in the day when Twitter was a thing, Twitter and LinkedIn, and I got loads and loads of feedback, and it was really good. And it was an excellent tool for just getting a whole load of people to give me stuff in. But after then I donated it to the Green Software Foundation, and I run this project, so this is totally my fault. We need to work out how to do it. We put the whole thing into GitHub so that people could collaborate on GitHub. I have had no further input into it whatsoever. So I think there's a lesson there that it's quite easy to change things on. It's quite everybody. Mostly people have access to Google Docs and they're not too scared by it. But a lot of the people who would want to contribute to things don't either. Can't remember how to use GitHub or can't be bothered, or it's lower barrier to entry is quite good if you actually want people to contribute to things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, GitHub is something that it's been the coders paradise, and it's always like that. So yeah, I mean. Yeah. Anyways.
So does anybody... Oh no, go for it. Go for it.
No, sorry. Please go ahead.
And I always have questions, so I'm fine. Not good with awkward silence past 5 seconds, so I'm going to ask. But I'm going to go building on that. The idea of making things easy to use because that's where the people are. I think that goes to some of the stuff you're talking about with measurements and observability of the green aspects. Is if you can't see it, how do you know what the impact you're having? If I don't know, even if it's just the dollar amount that my services that my teams are responsible for, how much do they cost? Like that's the first thing you do. You need to get that stuff right into everybody's, like, here's your monthly report. Here's what your team spent. So they can say, oh, I need to fix that.
I completely, in fact, we completely agree. The first place you should start should always be with money, because it's the easiest and most uncontroversial measure, and it's broadly associated. I mean, it's not perfectly associated with carbon, but carbon measurements are not perfectly associated with carbon either, because we know, I've spoken to grids, they just don't have that data. So you're always going off something which is a little bit of a guess. So you might, the easiest guess to get your hands on is in my opinion, it's always controversial. Your bill, your hosting bill. Yeah.
And it's typically going to be a much easier sell with whoever it is you need to sell it to in order to spend your time on it as well, because most of us don't have complete freedom over what we work on. We are at mercy of someone who's planning something.
Well, it's interesting because I always, when we said this, I always used to say this, and we were in complete agreement on it, that, first place is the most motivating thing is money. But since I've started doing workshops and training, and what I found is actually that isn't always the case. Sometimes it's, for some companies, it's money. So that's the most motivating thing. I think generally speaking, the most effective thing you can do is just get pricing to everyone so they can control their own bills. That's really effective, and it's amazing. You should definitely do it. But in terms of motivation, some companies are highly motivated by the money, or some employees are highly motivated by the money. Some are more motivated by carbon. And so you have to produce a kind of a fake carbon number to give people, and then they are more motivated. So I've run across a couple of companies where in startups where everybody knows there's no money, then they're quite motivated by saving money. Or if it's a company where everybody's talking about money saving all the time, people really believe it. But if you're a big company, which seems to have loads of money, the employees seem to find money saving less motivating than carbon saving. I've run across a couple of big companies like that. So I would say you have to kind of pay attention to the company and what their motivation is.
Do you know
Yeah.
or have a suspicion why that is? Because I would take a guess that maybe in the end of the day they're afraid of emitting carbon because that gives you big fines, regulations, etc., which would also then go down back to the money, maybe. But what is your theory? Like why people might be more motivated on the carbon aspect side than the money side?
I think it's purely intrinsic motivation. I think that people just want to do the right thing and be good. And if they work for a company where they think they can do that, they're allowed to do that, then they will do it. And yes, but I think people are highly motivated by cutting carbon emissions.
I mean, I love to hear that. I think we should take this bit of the recording and advertise it somewhere because I think more people need to hear that because everyone always starts with the money and goes back to the money, but there is a good part of the world that it cares about more than just the bank account figures, and I think we need to highlight that a little bit more because it's not convincing enough people just yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's what this ties back slightly to something that Sarah said earlier, and you said actually yourself. People just don't know. It's amazing. I'll go and give a talk to a huge multinational software company that's producing software that's used all over the world that everybody's using every day. Kind of level of and I'll go and talk to a room of really super intelligent people in that company and say, look, actually, here is something at work you can do to cut carbon emissions. And here's something you can build into your platform that will cut everybody's carbon emissions. They're blown away. They haven't it's just something they don't think about in their day-to-day lives.
I have a related question. So I'm also grappling with this, right? So I'm designing few workshops related to green software. And one of the things, especially here, I'm noticing that starting a conversation itself is difficult because many are not even aware what climate crisis is doing, right? Because the consequences, certain areas are not felt. And the media is not covering it to a larger extent. And so I included one model on climate change itself, that what is climate change and what it is doing. So while writing this book, was your assumption that people who are going to read are already aware about the crisis, or you've thought about including such a chapter, or is it there? I think it's not, I think, right?
Go for it, Sarah. Go for it.
Well, we intentionally did not include it. We had a chapter that kind of alluded to it, I think, in our original proposal that we eventually cut. We do have the building blocks chapter for you to understand the terminology and such, but I think, or at least I can only speak for myself fully. I'm kind of tired of talking about climate change. I'm very excited to talk about climate solutions. And to the point, if you pick up a book that says building green software, something in you are curious about that for whatever reason, and we wanted to tap into it. And I think they're like, if there's a scale of 100 people, there may maybe I don't know, 10, 20 who are already on board, like on our level, already doing it. We don't care about those people. They would just cheer them on. Then there are like maybe 10, 20 people who will never come on board. And like, I don't want to spend my energy on those people. So we focus on the ones in the middle and we mobilize them, because that's going to do a lot more than trying to get those 10% to even like get on board on the idea. Do you agree, Anne? Or how was it for you? Or how do you think about it?
I completely agree that it's very getting people to start believing is an enormous job, and I don't think those people at this stage we need to mobilize, as you say, the people who are at least at level 1 of the maturity matrix, who believe and want to do something about it.
Yeah, because
There
that's a
is
lot of people.
there is one related as to there are people who know about it, right? But it's just that if you take away the resources from building something they believe that it's useful and put it into building green software, then that's the dilemma they are facing, because their life depends on what they are building. So it's a difficult conversation, at least for me, to have. Even to start, they might listen, but they might not continue with this. So that is something I'm grappling with. But yeah, the book. So one more related question is, after publishing the book, did you went as to, oh, we should have included this chapter also, or we should have done something like
Well,
this, right?
Well, it's interesting you say, because our foreword by Adrian Cockcroft did add it in, which we weren't expecting. And I was quite pleased when he we got him to read the book, and he said, oh, I'll write a forward. And the forward he wrote is very much the climate change as a thing. And I did think afterwards, after all our that we'd all agreed not to do it, I was actually quite pleased that he'd done it. What did you think, Sarah, when you saw the foreword?
Yeah, when I first opened it, I was like, whoa. This is spicy, because I also didn't, but I'm also very pleased that that's how it turned out. I think it sets the tone. I think he kind of sets up us for success. Also, like, he makes us look good also, because he's Adrian Cockcroft and he's super cool. So no, I'm very happy that that's how it turned out. But it is kind of like when you open the book and it's like, first thing you read is like, the preferred terms are climate emergency, crisis, or breakdown. Boom. And it's like, whoa. And I don't know, I like it, but it's spicy.
I like the fact that it's not us. It's one of the things about when we wrote it, was we wanted to make it not a polemic, not a kind of like, okay, we all agree, here are the things we need to do. So kind of make it controversial in some ways, not too confrontational. But that meant that it wasn't very confrontational, and to a certain extent that was sad. So, but we needed to not do it, because that was kind of our how we were doing the book. But so I was quite glad that Adrian put something in a bit more, as you say, spicy and confrontational, but it wasn't us. Not that I mind being spicy. Well, no, I do. I don't really like being confrontational.
Neither of us really enjoys that. We're kind of not that type. We don't really enjoy that kind of attention, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least not I. I've even removed my slide about this is climate change from all my sessions, and then I just say I want to talk about solutions.
I really like that you've decided to jump that step, because there's already plenty of people and organizations out there who address the whole, like, bring awareness on climate change to people, helping them process their climate anxiety, paralysis, etc. But and then there's people who figure out how to measure this all, who are also brilliant people, right? But I think on the action side of things, we're still so lacking, because it is a wicked problem area, right? So let's not kid ourselves there. But I think somebody needs to make a start. So when I saw your guys' book, I was like, finally, someone who takes it into the pragmatic, practical space. So, and it wasn't needed to convince myself or other people I know who've read the book that climate change is a thing. So I'm glad you just decided to skip that step to keep the book, I guess, lean in a way.
Yeah, and I think one thing that stayed with me that I heard, it was a few years ago now, when Greta Thunberg, who is a Swedish activist for climate, she was on strike from school every Friday. That was her thing, because we have a school duty in Sweden. And then someone asked her, but can't you do so much better stuff for the climate if you just go to school and you learn about these things and then you come up with a solution instead of this? And she's like, no, all the answers are already here. We already know the problem. We already know the solutions. We don't need another one to like come up with new solutions. We need people to implement the solutions. Yeah, so she wanted to be that catalyst, and I feel the same. But I don't want to be that kind of catalyst. I want to give people the tools that we know exist. Like, they're here. Please use them.
Yeah, and they're not even, they're tools that do other things that are really good for your business as well. You know, it's kind of a no-brainer to do the things. You know, it's I first got into this nearly 10 years ago because I was quite interested in what Google was doing back then to cut costs. When they were the first hyperscaler, I was interested in what they were doing using cluster scheduling to both make their systems more to get higher machine utilization, which cut their hosting costs, and get better resilience at the same time. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And you thought, well, actually, that was also good for the climate. You know, it's like all of these things, because the cost is, you know, it's all about getting more functionality out of each use cycle, basically, and not just that, but each machine and in each unit of CPU that you have to play with. Yeah, it is fascinating how much this really good stuff has been around for years and years, and it's not being used. It's
Yeah.
so crazy.
But speaking of chapters that we maybe didn't add, is there any other chapter that you now, like, what are we, almost a year in hindsight, would have liked to add it, Anne?
Oh yeah, easily. It's like, so I, even though we covered it, I wish we'd covered it more, which is the upside, more of the upside of renewables. To a certain extent, even in the year that we've had, that it's only been a year since, it's been a year and a half since we finished writing the book. No, it's been a year since we
No,
finished.
a year, yeah.
Just a year since we finished writing. The global production of solar is going up exponentially. So, you know, there's so much more solar power available all over the world now, and so much of it is being thrown away. And that's only the beginning. There's going to be even more and more and more of it thrown away. Wind to a lesser extent, but particularly solar. So you've got all of this potential win here by writing things that can be shifted in time and basically, or yeah. I wish we'd talk more about the wins.
More about the wind.
The
Very
wind.
British.
No,
More about the wind.
The wins. I wish I'd talked more about the wind, but and the wins.
Is there a favorite chapter of yours? Favorite
Sorry,
chapter?
one more time.
Do you have a favorite chapter, each one of you, or?
I do. I mean, so that was, I thought about this before, and I think it's very hard. I have a special affinity to the measurement chapter, because that was one where I was heavily involved, so that will always have a special place in my heart. For other people to read, I think chapter 4, operational efficiency, is like a banger. But I also really love the co-benefits chapter. I don't know. It's a three-way tie. But those three are absolutely my favorite chapter.
Yeah, you're right. The operational efficiency chapter is the most important chapter, and so, you know, so to a certain extent, it's, you know, it's your favorite. But actually, I have a real soft spot for the networking chapter, which I kind of added in because it was it's a bit of an obsession of mine, which is the way that the internet does demand shifting and shaping, and because that used to be what I did 30 years ago, at the beginning of my career, that was the kind of thing I used to work on. And I'm really interested in how, again, all that stuff that we learned 30 years ago is so useful in the modern, in the world of, you know, shifting and shaping to handle demand, you know, variably available power. So yes, so that is kind of my favorite chapter, I think, just because it's a little bit of a chapter from my youth when I worked on exchange.
There always needs to be a building green software representative in exchange.
Yes, 30 years before, basically nearly 30 years before Sarah worked on Exchange, Microsoft Exchange, I worked on Microsoft Exchange. These things existed for a long time.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, but that was a good question. That is, yeah. Favorite chapters. It's a bit like, though, you can never. Well, the way that we did the book is that everybody owned a particular chapter. So we all kind of got stuck in all the chapters, but we all owned and did the first pass, the first draft of each chapter, although we chatted around a lot as we were doing it. So obviously, each of the chapters is your baby. And you also had a baby.
Yes.
While you're writing all the other the chapters, yeah. So it's very hard for you to choose your favorites, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think also because you kind of live with these chapters, it's not like you write them and then they're done. Like you write them, you get feedback in several iterations, and you rewrite and you put it away and think of something. So there are many versions of building green software like in our minds, right? Because there were many versions before we landed on the final one. There were chapters that we had in the original proposal that were not in. There were chapters that we added in like almost last second that came in very hot.
The AI chapter, particularly.
The AI chapter came in.
Oh my God, ChatGPT, we're going to put another chapter in the book.
It was like, yeah, talking to a data scientist, like, oh, we're our draft due in like 2 days. Can you just read this and make sure like it looks good to you as well? Like we've had other, yeah. I was glad that so I have been talking publicly about sustainable AI for a few years before that. So I was glad I had something to like fall back on a little, because that did come in very very hot. But yeah. So overall, it's my favorite book. Can I say that? Am I allowed?
So at the end of the introduction, you teased the last chapter says your challenge is cut everything in half in the next 6 to 12 months. My first question is, what am I responsible for? Like the 3 services I run or everything at my company? And the follow-up is, what's the motivation? Like if I feel like, oh, that's a good goal and something nice to do, maybe I can make some changes. The company-wide goal is difficult. And it goes back to the money is on the balance sheet, like what the quarterly earnings and reports are. The carbon footprints on our annual corporate social responsibility report. And those are 2 different audiences right now. How do we get those to go together? There's like 5 questions in there. Go at it.
Yeah. No, that is 5 questions, but the 5 good questions. We'll have to try and untease them a little bit. I would say that our goal was always, what can you do in your software systems? So it was, what can you do in your day-to-day work? Is there a way that within your scope of the systems that you have your hands on, you could cut the carbon emissions in half? And actually, there's quite a lot of I know companies who've cut their carbon emissions in half just by doing one of their hackathon, their 6 monthly hackathon, which was just like a 1-day hackathon, easy to get that signed off within the business, was a thriftathon. Try and save half their hosting bill in their thriftathon, and that was quite easy to get signed off because people just go, well, what we're going to do is rather than have a hackathon this year, we're going to save half our hosting bills, and that's easy to sign off. And that's I would say we didn't put, again with regrets, didn't put that in the book because somebody didn't tell me that they'd done it until after the book was out, which is inevitable. When you do the first chapter, first version, people come to you and make suggestions, and you think, oh no, we should have had that in. But of course, you didn't heard about it until the book was out. So you have to have a second edition, but not too soon.
Yeah, and I think it's possible. Therefore, we want to challenge and maybe provoke a bit for people to believe that it's possible. It's sometimes you have to see to believe it, or like someone has to challenge you to like, oh, but well, if that's a challenge, how would I go about doing it? And it can force you to get out of 1%, 1%, 1% mindset. But yeah, I think also all three of us are engineers at heart. Anne's been an engineer for much longer, has much more experience of various different roles. But at heart, we're all engineers, and we wanted to write where we come from and our point of view. We are not finance people who understands, or we do understand, but we're not super interested in how you report to your shareholders. Like, that's not our background. Our background is engineering, and those are the types of questions that we're going to be interested in talking about. We intentionally wanted it to be very technical, I think is fair to say. Yeah.
One theme that I pick up during this entire discussion is to loop back a bit earlier to the question about, like, could we do something like multimedia presentation about this, make it interactive? Like, what's the favorite chapter? And we also like have, spoilers, the green software maturity matrix at the end. I mean, one way is to view the entire book as the first chapter, because you're kind of breaking ground here. And I have the joy of not like being in the center of this, but I can see like what happens like at our business and a lot of people around us. And if I just look at the company I work on, actually this Thursday we will be trying to raise venture capital to try to implement some of this stuff in a new startup. And I hear a lot of like colleagues from other companies talking about the same thing. So my take is maybe the favorite chapter isn't written yet. And one way we have used, like a lot of people have read this book at our office as well, and we're planning to do an internal book circle about it. And we have like tried to get it out to everything from like managers to UX people to designers to everyone. We're a software engineering company. And some of the more design heavy folks felt like this isn't really their lingo. I mean, it's obvious you're coming from an engineering background, but we have the Creative Commons, you're breaking new ground. We have the Green Software Foundation going. So I would really like to just take a helicopter perspective in this and take a wider look and see like, oh, wait 2 years, 3 years, and let's see what's on the radar then.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting because it's an ever evolving area, and hopefully if we ever write a second book, second edition, what I would love to have, if I were to write a book in 2 years, I would love to have more case studies, because that was also a topic we talked a lot about in the beginning. We were like, oh, we're going to have a case study per chapter. We didn't end up doing that, as you all know. But that would have been a lot of fun and very energizing, I think, also to have.
In a related topic, I've got a third edition of a book coming up that's got loads of case studies in it about cloud native, and a lot of the case studies that I kind of side mentioned in Building Green Software were from that book, which I wrote. I wrote the first version nearly 10 years ago, but a lot of the stuff they were doing is quite green. You know, it was done for resilience reasons or for cost saving reasons, but as a result, it's quite green. And so there are case studies in there. But yeah, it would be great to get some actual green case studies. Yeah.
I will like to ask about because ChatGPT was mentioned. So how did it change the perspective of you writing the book? You know, that something like this is coming, and you must have guessed how it is going to impact the both hardware and software, right? How people are going to pursue, or the amount of load is going to increase. So such kind of questions might have popped into, right? So what happened? How did you pursue that? And did it, because you have a chapter on AI, of course, but did it reflect, did you think that we should write more about this, or in next edition?
Well, Sarah, this was it was a very interesting it was an interesting turn up.
Yeah, it wasn't in our original proposal, but then we figured it came out. Yeah, it came in very hot, and we really wanted to say something on it. Obviously, due to the timing, we were not going to be able to cover everything we kind of wanted, or we didn't have time to see. We could guess where the industry was heading, but there's a point where you stop writing, you hand it over, and then it's in process, and then it get published. So there is this. We didn't want to guess and then guess maybe incorrectly what's going to happen in those few months when it came out, because it's in print. After all, it's hard to change. But yeah, if there is a new book, I keep saying it's we currently have no plans for another book. But yeah, then I think that would be a topic that would be interesting to dive deeper into. Or do you agree, Anne?
Oh, totally, yeah. So on things that we didn't cover in the book, that they're kind of AI related, not just the existence of AI, and you did actually. It's a good chapter, the AI chapter, and that, as you say, we weren't intending to have that originally in there. We just thought, oh my goodness me, we can't not have an AI chapter. One thing that I think is a really interesting change in the past few years, few months, is that Texas is now one of the biggest rollers out of renewable power onto their grid. And they are calling for something that they've termed large flexible loads, which is the kind of the main concept of the demand shift. And we didn't use that term because that term didn't exist. But the idea of something that's CPU intensive, but not very latency sensitive. And they're saying we want things like that, which we can run when the sun's shining and not, if it's night, then there's no urgency on it. So the two things that are really coming up there as large flexible loads are Bitcoin, obviously, which we disapprove of terribly, but also machine learning. AI training, and I think. Sorry, go for it.
No, continue.
No, I wasn't really. I was just waffling.
I think on that note, we are at time, so maybe we should briefly mention how we intend to run the rest of this, and then say thanks and goodbye.
Yes. But yeah. So the idea is that we'll do one every month or so. So if you want to make sure that you're on, you get notified, let me know that you are in the call,
we'll do one chapter each time. So this was the introduction chapter, which was why it was a bit of everything, because we do our book club like we do our book. You get everything in the first one, and then you go deeper. So next will be the next chapter, and so forth. But we'll announce on LinkedIn and everywhere which chapter will be when, and
yeah. But it will be chapter 2, building blocks. Well, actually, it'll be chapter 2, building blocks if we can get Sarah here.
Yeah.
Sarah. All right, Sarah and Sara. That was the worst.
Yeah, we set you up. Now everyone is confused until the end of time. The good thing is, though, people have started realize my pronunciation is different, so I'm happy. All right.
Right. Well, it was lovely to see everybody.
It was so lovely. It was so nice. Thanks for coming and listening to us jab away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.